Opening. 3 pictures appear. One is of a woman giving a presentation behind a podium. Another photograph depicts 2 people engaged in a conversation. The other photograph is of a man explaining something to another man. The title reads Access Ed Project 2008 2-Day Symposium. Title transition to the next sequence of text. Access Ed Conference on Universal Design in Higher Education and Beyond. Milwaukee, Wisconsin, September 25th and 26th, 2008. Keynote speaker, Cheryl Bergstaller. Plenary, Universality of Captioning, Virginia Chiaverina. Video fades to black. Who uses captioning? Virginia Chiaverina. Virginia Chiaverina standing behind the podium talking to the audience.
So, who uses caption? Obviously, I come from a background of working with deaf and hard of hearing individuals. I worked here as program manager for many years. And so far, my presentation, I have been talking about captioning, really only focusing on deaf, hard of hearing individuals. But if you've looked at this, you'll see that of all users of captioning, 8 to 15% are deaf, hard of hearing individuals. So who are all these other people? We have learners of second language, individuals learning to read. The largest group are patrons of public places. And I saw another study that said public places, well, one of these isn't too public, but the 4th biggest users are airports. 3rd biggest users are, you got it, sports bars. I think it was, no, 3rd biggest users were gyms. People are working out. 2nd biggest users are sports bars. Top biggest users, this isn't a public place, but this is when couples are, one is trying to sleep in bed and the other one wants to watch TV. So truly, with an estimated 118 million people who use caption, it's truly an example of universal design. Originally designed for access for individuals who are deaf and hard of hearing, but we all know if you sat in a sports bar or if you work out in your health club, it is a benefit to all. So, if it's such a big, if it provides so much access for everyone, there should be some laws that make captioning, mandates captioning in all media, right? Well, there are some laws. They don't actually black and white say you gotta caption everything. In an educational environment, we are guided by ADA and 504, which both say that institutions must provide effective accommodations. Now, the ADA goes one step farther and says you have to give primary consideration to the communication preferences of an individual, unless you can prove that another effective accommodation exists. This is a little sticky language. What is effective accommodations? If I work in a post-secondary institution and we can't get let's say it's 2 days before a movie is going to be shown in a classroom, we just found out about it, I'm going to send a sign language interpreter, that's our only option. Is that effective communication? Now, some deaf and hard of hearing individuals will say, well, it depends on what the media is. If it's fast action demonstrating and I have to look back and forth at the interpreter and look up at the screen, that's not very effective for me. I'd say most institutions that I come in contact with really are trying to do the spirit of the law. They are really trying to make things accessible. But with captioning, number one is just the reality of gathering the media in time, knowing what's going to come up in every classroom. Here at UW-M, we do over 400 hours a week of sign language interpreting in a class. You can imagine how many hours, how many classroom hours, and how much media is being shown in all those classrooms. The reality of gathering everything ahead of time, either sending it away to get captioned, buying the caption version if you can get it, adding the captions ourselves, takes a lot of work and a lot of hours, and trying to keep up with all of this in post-secondary institutions is a major challenge. I always tell people, try to follow the spirit of the law. The letter of the law is, yeah, we can say, well, I think another effective communication would be to give you the transcript. Well, who's to say what's the effective communication? We can't get inside someone's head. If they tell us that's not effective for us, I have to accept what a consumer is telling me. I am not allowed to make any alterations on a piece of media without the producer's approval, without their permission. And that's sort of the rub. We send a letter out to the publisher and say, we would like to caption this DVD. We have a deaf student in the classroom. Please give us permission. We wait a month and we don't hear from them. So what do? Do we go ahead and say to the student, I know it's your primary, we want to consider your choice, and your choice is to have this media captioned. We want to honor that choice, but we also don't want to break the copyright law. And many institutions, and I know some of you here have talked to me about this, are in this bind. What we presently do, we make a good faith effort to get the permission. We send letters, we keep those letters on file. We will add caption, we alter the DVD, we only show it in that one class, and then we don't give it to the professor, we don't save it for any other purpose except to show it the one time in the classroom. And legally this hasn't been contested. No producer of videos has ever taken a post-secondary institution to court to say you broke our copyright law. But I think it's good for people to be aware of what you're doing when you're adding captioning without a company's permission. There ought to be a law. Well, there are some laws, and some states have taken this to task. The states of Missouri and Minnesota have each passed state laws about requiring educational institutions to have media captioned. Their system policies, the California Community College system has passed a policy that no instructor in the California Community College system is allowed to show media that's not captioned. And I know Sandy from Madison Area Technical College, they have worked on a policy. Those of you who are from institutions and are interested in policies, the Project Access Ed website here at UWM has an example of some procurement guidelines. Am I correct, Laura? They're procurement guidelines. If you're interested in some language that perhaps you could use, that's a good resource. That captioning is wonderful. It's universal design. It gives access to English as a second language learners. It gives access to deaf hard of hearing. It gives access to those of us who want to sit in the bar and have a drink and watch a baseball game. So what is the experience like for a deaf hard of hearing student? Sometimes it's hard for us who use captioning sitting in an airport to maybe try to understand what the experience is like for deaf hard of hearing students. So I'm going to put you in the role of Bob. Bob is taking basic art history. This is Bob's last class before a big exam. Bob uses captioning. If you were Bob, how would you have had any trouble preparing for your exam? What would have been, do you feel like Bob is having equal access to this lecture the same as a hearing person in the classroom? What were some of the issues?
Trying to read the captioning and then going up to when the caption is wrote on the board or whatever.
Okay, trying to read the caption and then go to the board. What was the specific problem with?
She was flipping past that, and so you could read the caption, and then by the time I finished reading the caption, she already moved to the next screen.
So exactly, there's a real pacing issue you can see. By the time you've read and looked up to see what the heck she's talking about, in deaf culture they have this sign goes, train gone. And the train was gone, the information was gone off the screen. That's one of the biggest issues.
The R2D2 Center logo appears. Below reads, copy and distribute freely but use in its entirety and do not alter. Access Ed Project Copyright 2009, Rehabilitation, Research Design and Disability, R2D2 Center. please visit us at access-ed.r2d2.uwm.edu. The Access Ed project is supported in part by the U.S. Department of Education's Office of Post-Secondary Education, PR Award number P33A050090. The Access Ed documents contained in this video are those of the grantee and do not necessarily reflect directly on the U.S. Department of Education.